AnxietyCenter.com podcasts, where we talk about everything anxiety, as well as other medical, mental, behavioral, parenting, and nutritional health topics. Thank you for joining us. We hope you find today's podcast interesting and inspiring. Here are your hosts, Jim and Marilyn Folk.
Hi, I'm Jim Folk.
And I'm Marilyn Folk. We are the founders of AnxietyCenter.com and the hosts of AnxietyCenter.com podcasts.
Once again, we thank you for joining us for today's podcast. This is episode 4.
In the first episode, we talked about the real cause of anxiety. Anxiety isn't caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, a biological problem with the brain, or by our genes. The physiological, psychological, and emotional state of anxiety is caused by a certain style of behavior. Behavior can be defined as a way we think and act.
So, some of the ways we think and act can cause the state of being anxious.
Yes.
In episode 2, we talked about why the state of being anxious can make us feel so awful. And that was because being anxious activates the body's stress response, which stresses the body. A body that becomes overly stressed can exhibit a wide range of symptoms. We call this overly stressed state stress response hyperstimulation because stress hormones are stimulants. And when the body becomes overly stimulated, it can present symptoms of hyperstimulation.
The more stress response hyperstimulated the body becomes, the more awful we can feel.
That's right, you bet. Yeah.
In our last episode, we talked about how stress affects the body and why stress response hyperstimulation can make us feel so awful. If you haven't listened to our first 3 podcast episodes, you can find them at our website, at our YouTube channel, or on iTunes under Anxiety Center. And the spelling of center is the Canadian spelling Centre.
Right, you bet. The information in the first 3 episodes led us to today's episode and our answer to one of the most common questions we've been asked over the years, and that is,
if anxiety is not caused by a chemical, biological, genetic, or medical problem with the brain, then why can we experience symptoms when we don't feel anxious or stressed?
one of the reasons people have a hard time believing anxiety is caused by behavior and not by a chemical, biological, genetic, or medical problem is because symptoms can appear and persist seemingly for no apparent reason. And because they can't make the connection between their symptoms, behavior, and stress, they assume that their symptoms have a more sinister cause.
Yes, that's so true. And if they conclude that their symptoms have a sinister cause, anxious people will worry about their symptoms, and away they go. They have symptoms they don't understand, then they worry about them, which stresses the body.
Which creates more symptoms, which they become more worried about, which stresses the body even more.
Which creates more symptoms, which they then worry about, which stresses the body even more.
And so on. This scenario is a common catalyst into a struggle with persistent anxiety disorder for many anxious people.
Because this scenario is so common, we're going to explain all of this now.
All right, so the question again is, if anxiety is not caused by a chemical, biological, genetic, or medical problem with the brain, then why can we experience symptoms when we don't feel anxious or stressed? Now, there are 2 main reasons for this, but before we get to those reasons, here is a common circumstance that often precedes a struggle with problematic anxiety.
We encounter a situation that's stressful. Now, as we get through that situation, we may not have any symptoms of stress.
Right, and sometimes we do, but because we understand the connection between our symptoms and stress, we aren't too worried about them because we know why they appeared.
Yes, we were stressed, and that stress produced symptoms, so there is nothing to worry about.
Right, but as we start to unwind and relax after the stressor is over, we might start to experience symptoms for what we think is for no apparent reason.
Yes, and because we don't understand why these symptoms appear after the stressor is over, and even worse, when they persist long after, anxious personalities might arrive at an incorrect conclusion that they are caused by a chemical, biological, genetic, or medical problem, which of course sets up the worry, stress, symptom cycle that we just described.
Yeah. And so now for the 2 main reasons.
Number 1, the adrenaline masking effect. Now, we explained this in our last podcast, but here's the gist of it. Stress responses secrete stress hormones into the bloodstream where they travel to targeted spots in the body to bring about specific physiological, psychological, and emotional changes that enhance the body's ability to deal with danger, either to fight or run.
Correct. And this is the reason the stress response is often referred to as the fight or flight response or emergency response.
That's right. The stress response is the body's super readiness mode when in danger. It's an important part of the body's survival mechanism.
And adrenaline, which is one of the body's stress hormones, masks pain and discomfort. It does this so that we aren't stopped by pain in the middle of fighting or fleeing. So while we're stressed and stress hormones are flowing, the pain response is diminished. This works great when in real danger.
Yes, exactly. If we were to fall and hit our knee and, that created a whole bunch of pain, it would be really difficult to get up and run again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But when the stressor is over and the stress response ends, adrenaline levels diminish. Now, this diminishing adrenaline level can unmask how the body truly feels.
Yeah. We also have to keep in mind that stress hormones, because of the changes they bring about in the body, stress the body. So after the stressor is over, we can experience the full extent of any damage the fighting or fleeing may have caused, as well as the adverse effects of the stress the body incurred during the stressor.
This combination can cause symptoms to appear after a stressor is over, whether the symptoms are from damage incurred from fighting or running during the stressor or from the negative effects of stress itself, or both.
Right, yeah. Another aspect to keep in mind is that it may take 2, 3, or more days for the body to calm down after a major stressor. This means that it may take a number of days before the true extent of the body's damage or the harm caused by stress itself to appear. Now, this is why many people experience a dramatic increase in symptoms during the first week of their holidays. They work hard before the holiday, and then when they take some time off, that's when the body has a chance to gear down and reveal the true extent of the body's stress.
That's right. We explained this in episode 3. If you want more information about this, you may want to go back and listen to that episode.
So the first reason we can experience symptoms when we don't feel stressed or anxious is because of the masking effect of stress hormones and the after effects of stress.
That's right. Now, the number 2 reason is that many anxious and stressed people have lived anxiously and stressed for so long that their highly anxious and stressed lives feel normal to them.
Isn't that true? Yeah.
Because their highly anxious and stressed state feels normal, they believe it is normal.
Right. But it's not that their overly anxious and stressed state is normal, but that they don't recognize it as being abnormal and unhealthy until the body presents symptoms that gets their attention.
When we've done a stress audit with our clients, more often than not, we find they are completely unaware of their level of unhealthy stress. So when their symptoms appear for no apparent reason, they can't connect the dots between their elevated level of stress and their symptoms. So they conclude there's a more dire reason.
So the reason sensations and symptoms appear when a person doesn't feel stressed is not because their bodies aren't overly stressed, but that the person isn't aware of how overly stressed their body is.
That's right. I can remember being very anxious from the time of 5 years of age. And so for me, as far back as I can remember, I felt anxious. And so that was my normal. And it wasn't until I dealt with my own anxiety and my nervous system finally dropped to a normal level that I recognized that, oh my goodness, all these years I have lived very anxiously. I thought that was normal. I remember sitting back one day and going, wow, so this is how regular people feel.
Yeah, that was the same with me. I spent so much time on the go and going and anxious and being worried. And I just thought that was normal. And when my body kicked up a fuss, I had no idea. And when the psychologist said, well, your body's under stress, I thought he was crazy. 'Cause to me, it didn't make any sense. I didn't feel stressed. But after I worked through my anxiety issues, oh my gosh, completely different. You really do see a different perspective of it. And I've also had similar experiences with some of my clients too, where they listed many of their major stressful events, all going on at the same time. But when I asked them about it, they didn't realize to what extent their body was being impacted. So, this just goes to show how effective the adrenaline masking effect is.
Absolutely.
And how we can be so unaware of our own level of stress. Yeah, so, this is a common reason why people may not feel anxious or stressed, yet experience symptoms of stress. It's often a combination of both reasons, the after effects of stress and not recognizing how stressed the body actually is.
We always have to keep one truth in mind. When the body is exhibiting sensations and symptoms of stress, it is overly stressed.
Yeah.
So whether you think your body is overly stressed or not, an overly stressed body will produce symptoms.
Absolutely. And every time. Mm-hmm. Panic attack disorder often sets up for a very similar reason. A person is under great stress. The body experiences an involuntary panic attack due to elevated stress, which scares the person. Because first, panic attacks can be powerful experiences. And second, because the person doesn't know why she had a panic attack, she may believe the panic attack occurred because of a medical problem and not because of stress at all. Mm-hmm. So because she doesn't know why she had a panic attack, she might conclude that panic attacks are uncontrollable. Well, because it occurred for seemingly no apparent reason and has a more sinister cause, which an anxious person will worry about. And as you know, worrying creates the state of being anxious, which stresses the body, and away we go again. So it's relatively easy to get a panic attack cycle going through worry, stress, and more worry if you don't understand what's going on. Yeah.
Nevertheless, anxiety sensations and symptoms occur for two main reasons only. The body is experiencing an active stress response, and or the body is overly stressed, which we call stress response hyperstimulation. Yeah. If your body is exhibiting symptoms of stress, it is stressed, whether you feel anxious or stressed or not.
That's right, yeah. Stress causes symptoms of stress. If you are symptomatic, your body is stressed, period. Yeah.
Fortunately, stress symptoms aren't harmful, even though they can seem powerful. Simply reducing the body's stress and giving the body sufficient time to recover will eliminate all symptoms of stress in time.
Yeah. And when you think about it, eliminating symptoms of stress is relatively easy. Reduce stress and give your body sufficient time to fully recover. Nothing more is required. In time, it does. Yeah. But usually overcoming anxiety symptoms is much more complicated than that, which we're going to address in our next episode.
So until next time, thanks again for joining us today. We wish you every success in your recovery efforts.
We look forward to you joining us for our next podcast. And until then, bye for now.
Bye for now.